David Miller. David is the founder and executive director of 3DataX Corporation. And Dave has over 20 years of experience in transportation sustainability and alternative fuels. Dave's going to just share his thoughts with us over the next 20 minutes.
Great. And I want to say thank you very much to Peter Fusaro, the founder, as well as to you, Dave, for being our moderator. And today I am going to be talking about transporting people and goods, infrastructure decisions, and big data. And the main point in today's discussion is a first rule of decision making, which is measurement is key. Stephen Donofrio said earlier today, and this is a guy I really admire, Peter Drucker, but Stephen quoted Peter, who said many different ways, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So in my talk, I'd like to put out some points to consider, which is essentially challenges, big changes over a short period of time. Health, climate, and energy yields a convergence, and that's where we start having some challenges. The second point is measurements. Storage and organization of measurements over time equals a database creation, and I think an opportunity. The third point is historical trends allow for reliable forecasting in real time, things along the lines of carbon metrics. But we first have to begin by looking at trends and historical data. So if we look, again, I could probably put out global information. I'm looking primarily at greenhouse gas emissions from the United States based on 2019. And if we look at historical measurement of emissions, we can actually look for clues. And some of these trends are very interesting. So for example, we know that the transportation category, the one that I've been in for over 20 years, is as large or larger than electricity generation regarding greenhouse gas emissions. And then it's followed by industry, agriculture, commercial, residential, and outside US territories. So we do know that transportation is energy intensive. And why is this? Well, simply put, moving people and goods from point A to point B requires significant energy. And then the second reason is the interaction of moving vehicles and vessels with roadways, pathways, and infrastructure requires the ability to overcome friction. And global communities at all levels at this stage of the game, local, state, territory, region, country, they're now both inter and interdependent. So what I'm suggesting is we need to leverage existing data, and we can then tease out emissions trends and essentially start looking for new transportation ideas. And we can look at some of the things from the historical data. We know that air pollution emitted from transportation commits to climate change, smog, poor air quality. These are the negative impacts on health and welfare of all people on a global level. And pollutants that contribute to poor air quality also include particulate matter, particle number, particle mass measurements, nitrogen oxides, and volatile organic compounds. So these are all the things that we're aware of. But if we continue to look at these clues, and we also understand the situation with the NOx total emissions inventory that the United States is essentially looking at from a transportation point of view, and we also have an idea of the VOC compound emissions and particulates, both the PM 2.5 and PM 10 standards, we can start to see some things that start to show us some trends. And then the last couple of toxics that we can look at to get an idea of the historical trends would be benzenes, formaldehyde, and diesel particulate matter. And so by looking at the data, if we can get this data, then I suggest, and data suggests, that roadway materials and design can be looked at. We can essentially start looking at better traffic control. And we can also start looking at infrastructure and smart technologies. So the question is, how do we change this, and how do we make certain that the cure isn't worse than the disease? Well, we really do need more information from our current fossil-based transportation infrastructure. And we need this in order to pursue the big data play. So I guess what I'm saying is, first, we have to start with what we have. Second, we have to avoid a knee-jerk reaction, but we also must balance the look before we leap with analysis paralysis. So there's a little bit of a balancing act. And the looking before leaping has happened in the past, at least in the United States, in the US transportation sector. We had problems many, many years ago with sulfur. And when we tried to remove the sulfur without essentially looking at the best ways of doing this, we ended up having engine problems in the United States. There are some people in this audience that may remember the reformulated gasoline debacle of the 1990s, early 1990s, and we had fuel line issues that they started to erode. It was well-meaning, but the problem is that we just didn't look deeply enough, and we didn't have enough data. And then the last point about historical challenges is in the late 90s. This is when I really started getting involved with this industry. There was this immediate push for compressed natural gas and liquid propane vehicles, and we found out we just didn't have an adequate infrastructure to accept these kinds of vehicles, which is really unfair to those fuel sources and those vehicles. So we want to avoid another leap, and we want more data. And some of the current possible solutions and options being looked at in this sector are telematics, low resistant tires, this concept called platooning. If you want, I'll explain that offline. Hybrids, autonomous vehicles, and of course, electric vehicles. And by the way, I appreciate Nick Grundish's presentation earlier today and his ideas on solid state, brine, and alternatives, because I learned a lot from his earlier presentation. But just let me start out by saying, I love all vehicles. I'm a vehicle guy. So I'm going to use electric vehicles as an example only with what I'm talking about with respect to avoiding a potential leap. Just some current passenger car trends. We know that in the United States, for example, there's 279 million gas-powered vehicles here in the United States. We also know that about 17 million vehicles a year are purchased in the United States. So here's one of the challenges with electric vehicles. If each of those vehicles, the brand new ones, were electric, it would take more than 16 years to replace the whole fleet. And essentially, we know that modern vehicles are lasting 12 plus years. So that's going to take even longer for that fleet to get replaced. And that's just in the United States. I've talked to friends in India that have said it's even more challenging in some of these other developing countries with these different fleets. So that's one of the challenges. And then the other is that the electricity in an electric car is still, to this day, primarily globally from fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. In fact, it's about 67% globally is coming from fossil fuels. And fossil fuel use globally is actually increasing. Right now, there's about 80% of developing countries that are switching to coal. So this is a very, very critical trend. And this is not even factoring in the push to electric vehicles. So the optimal approach, I think, includes, one, a realistic transition plan to whatever is coming. Number two, I think we really have to compare apples to apples with respect to the total carbon cost, the total usage cradle to grave. And then the third is we want to avoid buying a pig in a poke. That's a US legal slogan that's used, but essentially we don't want to commit to something before we have an idea of what we're getting. So what I'm suggesting is let's improve what we currently have in place while exploring all these options. We're looking at electric vehicles, hydrogen. We also have fossil fuel improvements that we should be doing right now. Roadway layout, design, condition, routes. So how do we do this? Well, we first want to make certain we have standardized measurements with storage and organization over time, because this will equal a powerful database and, most importantly, better decisions. And working within our reality provides a platform for ongoing carbon credits, carbon offsets, and globally accepted metrics. What our company is doing is we're focusing on what we like to call data-driven decision-making. And so we're working with multiple countries right now and with new programs. There's essentially been a global push with countries, cities, metropolitan areas, regions, and territories. And what we've been doing is we got a couple of programs and products that we've been developing. One is micro collection devices in order to overcome data scarcity. And we have an integrated portable emissions measurement system that we've developed over the last handful of years that we've been starting to use with governments in the European Union and Latin America. We've also started working on what we like to refer to as the CARTA database, which stands for Cooperative Agreement for a Regional Transportation Alliance. Again, this is just gathering everything that we've got over the last 20 years, as well as some of these micro devices, and pump in on a regular basis what's going on with data in all countries. And the lessons that we've learned from the retail and finance industry with overlapping and compound data sets are leading to big data software development, such as what we refer to as Magnex, which is the mobility analytics for a global network of economic data exchange. The point is, we've got to also make certain we understand the financial impact with the data and the decisions we make. And that's what history has shown us is, if we do a look before we leap, sometimes it actually costs us more in the way of time and money and health, which we want to avoid. And so our big data software is we're seeing a convergence of two concepts. We're seeing a simplifying of answers regarding the best way of moving people and goods. Very straightforward. We also are looking at moving people and goods with the lowest amount of emissions combined with the greatest financial gain. And so what we're doing in Europe right now, for example, is we've got this mass vehicle testing pilot. We're doing, we've got locations right now that are ongoing in Sweden. We just brought Germany on board, as well as Belgium, Spain, and France. And a very exciting development is Latin America is also now taking on some of these the same things that we're doing in Europe, which is exciting. And we've been using our 3Datix Parsec IPEMS equipment to get the data. So far, since February, we've done 100+ vehicles. By the summer, we're going to have 1,000 vehicles. And again, this is one of the other challenges is it's easy to process 10 or 15 or 20 vehicles with a smart software, but when you start looking at thousands or tens of thousands, it's a different challenge, a different scale. But we've been developing that, and we've essentially been also looking at light duty diesel and petrol vehicles. But we also have the ability and have started looking at the heavy duty vehicles as well. We're building this database right now to improve these decisions. So to kind of start wrapping up, where do we see the market going? Looking at vision casting and trends. One, carbon-based transactions will be linked to blockchain. This is going to be an improved value proposition. The second thing that we're seeing is, I think we're going to see more of a return to mixed-use city centers to reduce commuter, and we're going to see reduced POVs, privately owned vehicles. I'm also sad to report that I think we're going to see less of these leisure or Sunday drives, as they used to be called. It's no longer going to be a pastime, because there's going to be more and more of a carbon cost to it. And lastly, electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles. What do I think? My prediction, it's still a ways out due to a lack of a pragmatic plan, and there's still some significant infrastructure challenges. So to conclude, measurement is the key to creating the future. Again, Peter Drucker said it two different ways. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And another way to put it is, what gets measured, gets managed, gets done. So with that in mind, I'd like to say 3Datix is really honored to be part of the green summit this year. And it's our common and collective goal to contribute to be part of the solution for the greater good. And again, I want to say thank you to Peter and David for allowing us this opportunity and for me to speak. So with that, if there's any questions.
Dave, thanks for that. It was a great summary. For the audience, if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A box. Dave, there's already a couple. One is what your take on I mean, you touched on this a little bit with Carta and Magnex, but what's your take on the footprint standards, on open footprint standards that are being published?
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge is how to properly link those standards with the transportation sector and essentially standardize the metrics. I mean, I think that's really the biggest issue. We're running into this disconnect, for example, between Europe and the U.S. On various standards about whether you measure parts per million or grams per X, or are you looking at particle number or particle mass? So I think that really the biggest thing is a definition of terms. That's my biggest concern right now. That and the fact that I think we still need to compare apples to apples. So sorry to be vague, but that's really what the challenge is right now.
One thing you talked a little bit about was the kind of evolution of the space itself in terms of the technology and so on. Wayne Gretzky used to talk about how to skate toward where the puck is going, not to where it is. I think everybody talks a lot about the hardware and even the software of this, but I'm curious, the data itself and our capacity to actually absorb it is going to evolve really quickly over the next little bit. Even if you think about, kinetic energy and footprints on things like sidewalks, right? Understanding the footprint of a city. So, as that starts to happen, what are the things we need to be considering as the data sets themselves evolve?
Well, again, I think it's really, if you're going to predict the future and you're going to create the future, you still have to start where you're at based in reality, and that's where you have to start defining terms. I mean, that's what you just talked about. I think is one of the hardest things. It's real easy to talk flowery and philosophical about, well, we want to take care of the planet and we want to save it for our children. Of course we do. That's that who wouldn't? That's what we're all here for. But until you get practical and you say, okay. If I use this amount of carbon, then it means this to the pluses and minuses of not only me but people around me. So I think that we need to do a better job defining terms and understanding the actual cost and bring it back down to I don't want to call it Bitcoin, but almost like a Bitcoin of carbon, so that that everybody's talking the same language. And I think that's the biggest challenge.
We've got a nice sales question for you here. Is your technology proprietary or off the shelf?
Oh, no, it's proprietary. We've got, I've got 20 plus years in this. We have several patents that we've filed and have been issued globally, and it's taken a while to get to this point, but it is for sale. So we'll make it available.
That's great. I guess another question here, are there, when you were just responding to me there before about the evolution, you talked a little bit about the standards. Any thoughts on ownership of the data sets as we go through this, kind of where they live and sit?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. That's been something that we've wrestled with, not only with our board of directors, but also some of these governments that we're working with. And my feeling, and this is, I feel very strongly about this. We may be curators of the data. We may be the ones responsible, our company, in putting it somewhere and creating a structure. But I don't feel that we own that data. Now, I do feel that we can provide software that is a powerful tool to essentially look at the big data and unlock information for decision making. But I don't believe that that it would be responsible of any company with that kind of data to make it proprietary. I think that has to be released in the wild, and then anybody can look at it and make whatever decisions they need. The last point on that, which these various governments have made very clear, is we don't want spying going on. So the data must be redacted. In other words, you don't want to be able to see what, Bob Smith did with his vehicle and what kind of situation it is and what license plate number. That data is redacted. But trends and vehicle usage and condition of vehicles and vehicle miles traveled, all that data really needs to be released into the world so that all governments can have what they need to make decisions.